Right, hi Year 9. Sorry, my computer's a bit slow. Okay, right, so this video, I believe it's the 5th lesson of the topic. So title Year 9 is Biodiversity and Humans. Okay, what I would like you to do is a starter activity based on what you did last lesson. And that is, let me read it, explain how both, so let's get me pen, explain how both the oxpecker, let's make that clear for you if you can't remember, is a bird, and the wild cow benefit from their mutualistic relationship. So you might need to think about what a mutualistic relationship is and also how they both benefit. So Year 9, you need to pause this video and answer the starter. Okay, right, I'm now going to go through the answers. Hopefully that was paused and you've completed it. Right, boys and girls, the oxpecker gets food, nutrients from the buffalo or the wild cow, and the wild cow, boys and girls, gets cleaned. Sorry about that. The reason why it's a mutualistic relationship, Year 9, is because they both benefit, and that is a mutualistic relationship. And it even says to you benefits, and they've even told you, okay, they both benefit in that relationship. So it gets food and nutrients because the oxpecker eats the parasites and the fleas from its fur or its skin, and the buffalo or the wild cow, sorry, gets cleaned. Okay, guys, what we're looking at today is how humans can affect biodiversity. Now, what I mean by biodiversity, it's really important that this is a definition that you're aware of. So if you haven't got this definition in your notes from this topic, make sure you have. So it's the variety of plant and animal life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. Okay, so that means the Amazon rainforest, boys and girls, is much more biodiverse. And the reason it's more biodiverse is because there is a variety of different animals and plants. There are more of them. So, for example, there'd be monkeys to birds to woodlice to dragonflies. There's lots of different organisms and lots of different variety. Whereas the desert, boys and girls, would not be very biodiverse because there might be only 1 or 2 species that can survive there. Okay, so how do humans affect biodiversity? That's what we're going to go through in this video. Right, so boys and girls, in your own time, so pause this now, produce a little spider diagram in your book, okay, and what I want you to do is think of how humans, what humans might do, good and bad, that could affect the range and the number of different species there are in an ecosystem. Okay, all right, so pause this and see what information you can get. Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to go through the main parts that you need to know on this lesson. Okay, guys, fortunately and unfortunately, the population of humans is getting quite large. Okay, so hopefully you realise what I mean by population. Why are humans a population? Because we are one species in an environment. Okay, so the population of humans is increasing. We're not in geography at the moment, but there's many reasons it's increasing, okay? And the issue of the population of humans increasing is that we need to feed us. Now, we need the food in order to feed the rising human population. Now, 17%, you don't need to know this, just fact of the day, you're welcome to make a note of it. 17% of protein eaten by people globally comes from fish. So fish is actually a really, really important source of protein in the diet of human beings. Now, as the population increases, we need more fish. So therefore, what's happened is something called overfishing has become a problem. Now, what I mean by overfishing is wild fishing. Now, you might realise that when you go to lots of ecosystems and areas like national parks, actually wild fishing is frowned upon and it's illegal in some places. Now, what I mean by wild fishing, boys and girls, is, I'm going to draw a little picture, is simply, here is a lake, here is the land, here is me, here is my fishing rod, here is a fish. So if you look, people, humans, are going out and they are wild fishing. Now that means they are taking a fish out of the ecosystem. Now there are some fishermen year 9 that are wonderful. They take the fish out and then they actually put the fish back in because they think it's cruel. I mean, sometimes that can shock the fish, and usually the fish actually dies when it's placed back into that ecosystem, sadly. There are other people that take a fish and they eat the fish, and that obviously removes it from the ecosystem. Now, I'm hoping that you're thinking from previous understanding the word interdependence. Now, the removal of that one fish could have cascading effects on the ecosystem and the organisms in it, because we should know that that fish has a predator, which now will run out of food, and that fish also is probably in competition with another organism for prey. Do we see? That is going to affect that fish. Removal of that is going to affect that fish, and it might even affect that fish. So wild fishing is a problem. And not only are we wild fishing, we're overfishing because people are relying on fish as a source of protein for their diet. Now, there are rules about fishing. So if you go to certain national parks, if you get caught fishing in certain areas, you can get fined, which I agree with. Okay, so what are humans doing to try and help biodiversity? Do we see what we're doing? At the moment, humans, by wild fishing, are actually affecting biodiversity. They're reducing biodiversity. So you might want to write that down. Wild fishing, year 9. Humans, what we're doing is we're reducing biodiversity. Sorry about my writing again. And year 9, I hope you realise why that reduces biodiversity, because that is going to cause many species of fish to be removed from an ecosystem, and it naturally reduces the variety of species. My pen is playing up today, as always, in every video. Okay, all right. So what humans have decided to do, because they've realised that wild fishing is quite bad, is they've actually made a fish farm. Right, fish farming it's called. You might have heard of it. There's not a huge amount around this area. Okay. Now, fish farming involves pens and small spaces, so you might want to make sure you write that down. And the whole point is to produce more fish and to reduce overfishing of wild fish. All right, sorry, I can't get rid of this tab. I've tried. So let me repeat that. Fish farming are these pens, or they're called small spaces. You see the pen here? Okay, and they're in an ecosystem of water. And the whole point is humans realise actually wild fishing is bad and it's affecting biodiversity, and we therefore want to help biodiversity. We're trying to do a good thing by fish farming and putting these fish into pens. Okay, so let's evaluate. Boys and girls, that's what the pens look like. You'll see actually there is a net that goes all the way down to the bottom. Okay, I really want to make that clear to you. You do not need to know the structure of these pens, in detail, but just appreciate there is a net that goes all the way down to the bottom, because otherwise the fish would just swim out, wouldn't they? Okay, and there's going to be quite a lot of fish that's reared. And what I mean by reared is grown up in these pens. Okay, right. So what I want you to do, is have a little pause, and I want you to think of some, in your own kind of thoughts, what are some advantages, what are some good things about fish farming? Why have humans decided to do it? So if you can think of any, write them down. Make sure it's paused. Okay, year 9, so from that, these are the kind of advantages that I thought of. Right, produces more fish. Boys and girls, I'll explain why it produces more fish. Look, if you've got this pen, and there's me, the farmer, and I'm chucking food in, then them fish are getting fed a lovely, good diet. Therefore, because they're so happy and they're able to grow quite quickly, they're also able to reproduce. Yeah, or survive. Because they're reproducing, they're breeding, and they're surviving, that means you get more fish. It reduces overfishing. That means people are not going out to, Lake District and wild fishing, they can just go to Sainsbury's knowing that there's plenty of fish because it's been fish farmed. Yeah? The fish are better fed. Of course they are, because there's farmers that are feeding them. They haven't got to find their own food. They haven't got to, get away from predators or compete really, because there's enough food going into that pen for all the fish to get there enough. Yeah? They grow faster, of course. If this farmer is feeding these fish, I don't know, 3 times a day, then they're not starving. They get quite plump, they're getting bigger, and humans want bigger fish, because then in Sainsbury's, you go into the supermarket, look at your fish, and you're getting quite big, meaty fish because they're bred on a fish farm. And also, they're protected from predators. There's no large predators in these pens. It is literally the same type of fish